Yeah, Herman, I said that the other day and someone corrected me. I know it's a local pronunciation thing, so, but thank you.
Yeah, it has been weeks of fun for me.
Yeah, the double L is people say ja, sha, ya, like it's all over the place. Um, okay, cool. Welcome everyone. Um, Congratulations on the Medalla launch. However, whatever your local pronunciation says. Um, Lots of fun. The public call was fun. Thank you for the Staker guys for running that. And we had some low participation out the gate, but things are looking stable. I also know that we have ongoing issues being worked through by various client teams, and a lot of collaboration going on underneath the hood. So that's good. The first thing that I wanted to do, and let me share the agenda, is to just talk through, um, kind of enumerate what happened leading up to launch, um, to better understand some of the things that went wrong and some of the things that went well, just so that we can keep our eyes moving forward. And then based off of this call, I'll circle back and fill in some more details in a document. And if there's, just for reference, and maybe highlight a few points, sticking points that we should double check next time we go through this. Okay, so I did write up a few of the things. I'm going to go through this document that I just shared. Um, Pretty much we have pre-launch and post-launch. The week before the launch, we definitely had a number of issues with Launchpad, primarily around installation and usage of Python. There was an effort to get binaries prepared, but that was not completed in time for this round. I think that would have solved a lot of issues, and there's probably some debate as to whether Python was a reasonable choice at all. But lots of feedback has been heard, and there's a number of kind of rapid changes and iteration going on based on that feedback, and expect some better UX around this soon. Genesis info was found at 17:27 on August 2nd. Clients agreed. It's good. But after Genesis info was found, that's when clients start peering, and we noticed a range of issues at that point. This is what I remembered and could find in my documents, but the Lighthouse boot nodes were down. The Prism boot node ENRs had the wrong ports and so could not be contacted. The Prism release until August 3rd at around 13:30 did not actually have boot nodes set, and so those peers that had turned their nodes on early had 0 peers. And Teku included, I believe the boot node included by Teku was just quite simply the wrong ENOD. Those issues led to a mildly stressful Sunday for some, scrambling to try to debug and figure out peering, and also led to a number of required updates by node operators to be able to peer before Genesis. Obviously, the ideal is you have your node running, Genesis info is found, network peers, and we're good. So we didn't hit that ideal and had to work through a lot of stuff there. Some of this is pretty obvious, getting the boot nodes correctly, including the boot nodes. And there was a Prism Teku metadata issue. I don't know exactly what was going on here. I know there were a lot of errors in the logs, but I don't know if it was a critical issue, but that was also fixed in that time span. And I know there was plenty of other small changes going on, last minute things. Does anybody have anything to add to the pre-launch discussion or discussion at any of those points?
And one thing that I noted was some people were making deposits that were 64 ETH or 96 ETH. I guess there's maybe a bit more education to be made that you if you make a large deposit, that doesn't mean you'll have multiple validators.
Right. I think that well, to Justin's point, we should find those, and Prism does a pretty good job. At least if you go and look at their faucet channel, we can often track down users. So sometimes we can figure out why they made that mistake. Was it a tool that helped them do that, or was it a misunderstanding? So let's make a note of that and try to track down some of those users. Ben?
Yeah, at least in my case and one other I know of, there was a bug in Launchpad which made a double deposit for a validator, which was a bit of a surprise.
Gotcha. So that was two discrete. Oh, sorry.
It seems like from all this,
I would be very keen to hear about that.
So that was two discrete deposits rather than like a 64 deposit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, two separate 32 ETH deposits. Yep. Yeah, I locked it at the time.
Okay. The Launchpad will allow you to re-upload the same deposit data.
Yeah, I did it once. I had 64. I was doing 64 deposits at once, so I had 64 MetaMask pop-ups to work through, which took 45 minutes. And 65 of them must have appeared. I didn't count because when I checked, I had 65 deposits of 32 ETH, with one validator having 2 deposits. So I followed the workflow exactly as designed.
Ben, I think that was in MetaMask because I had the same thing happen to me. It was like maybe a transaction didn't get confirmed and then got sent twice or something.
Okay.
That can't really happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
because of the way the nonce works, that's like a double signal to MetaMask to create 2 transactions, right?
I mean, would be one thing. Could we talk to MetaMask? I mean, to fix that UI bug that it opens like all the windows at once.
So one thing we're trying to address on the Launchpad side now is rather to wait until the callback comes back from your whatever you've done on the MetaMask side before initiating the next transaction. So it will just be sort of linear. Once you click confirm or reject, it will just load up the next transaction for you.
Gotcha. Let's table. Thank you, Ben, for the potential bug or UX issue. It's definitely concerning. Let's table the rest of Launchpad discussions. Maybe, Carl, where's the best place to have these discussions? Or we could have a call to discuss some of this stuff, but I don't want to belabor the Launchpad too much right now.
Yeah, either hit me up directly or issues on the repo are the best places to address this.
Cool, thanks, Carl. Other pre-launch things that I missed?
it seems like from my experience, I also feel like Genesis delay of 2 days may be short. I'm not sure if anyone feels the same way. I thought that increasing Genesis delay to 3 days may not be a bad idea.
I've been thinking 96 hours, 4 days minimum for mainnet. I've said that a few times in different channels, but not made that like abundantly clear. But I think for the V1 release, which I think will primarily just have some mainnet parameter changes, but configuration changes, 96. You could argue a week.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, another really nice thing, and I think most clients are doing that, is cutting a release after Genesis parameters are known with Genesis state. So users, most, if not all validators, are actually following an ETH1 chain, but there's also a class of users that aren't validating and don't necessarily need to follow the ETH1 chain, and so it's nice to just have them have the state. It's nice to not anyone that comes online 2 hours before mainnet have to like process through all the logs. So there's a lot of benefits there. Other pre-launch items that we learned. Okay, great. So then, leading up to the launch, thanks again, eStaker guys. That was really well organized call, and doing something like that for mainnet I think is gonna make a lot of sense. I posted some just quick things that we would be looking for on that call, very kind of end user things that people can watch for. Watching for early blocks, watching for participation. It's kind of the main things. The initial epochs came out. We got early blocks. We definitely had some sparseness in those blocks, but like we weren't tracking that to the T. We were just kind of seeing, okay, there's some skip blocks here and there without knowing the exact percentage. But it became obvious after Epoch 0, we ran some, I think maybe the Block Explorer shows this, but we also ran against some of the APIs that we had, I think maybe 57% on the initial epoch, but during epochs 0 through 4, so the first 5 epochs, we had somewhere between 52 and 58%. So after a couple of epochs, it became clear that we were not going to have justification and finality out the gate. At which point, we began scrambling in many different directions. I believe Cayman on the call noted that gossip was overwhelming Lodestar. At least that was the declaration at the time. I'm sure there's been much more investigation since. Zahari also said that we're seeing, I think in an internal chat, problems with our nodes that might be contributing to low participation rate, investigating. And at 27 after the hour, Marin said he's running validator node successfully, but lacking peers, so only one attestation got included. So we had some client errors on both Lodestar and Nimbus, which accounted for at least 10% of the network just from the client teams. Each client team was running about 5% of validators, so there's some of it. But we also began to look through the Gorley Madasha whale deposits, which we had tracked before, and noticed that there were a handful of approximately 5% users that were offline. Participation began to start climbing. It was 62% at the end of Epoch 5. I was able to reach out and contact one of the 5% users due to the Prism faucet tracking. They responded with, just started them up, should be going now, slight time zone hiccup on my part. I, at the time, noted that I suspect maybe he had Prism running, but it didn't appear due to the lack of boot nodes from a couple of days ago, but I have not investigated that theory. At the end of Epoch 6, we had participation above 2/3 for the first time, so we justified 69%. And then I believe at the end of Epoch 9, or the end of Epoch 8, we finalized Epoch 6. So we had finality. And another thing I noted was that at 14:30, came and confirmed that the Lodestar validators were moved over to a Lighthouse node, contributing to an additional percentage. We saw definitely over the first handful hours some waves in participation. Getting up into the low 80%, I think is about the highest that we've been. And over the night, I think many Lighthouse users had went offline. And so we saw early in the morning in the US, there was some drop in percentage, likely due to Lighthouse failures. I believe these are still under investigation. And at the same time, there were, around that morning, the second day, a number of Prism nodes had a sequence of maybe 6 to 10 epochs of no attestations, and I'm not certain. I believe there were a couple of critical fixes introduced by Prism that morning. I don't know if they've had any issues since then. There's ongoing investigations with Nimbus and Lodestar. The network generally looks healthy. I know there's a ton of stuff going on that's not immediately noted here, but I just primarily noted the things that affect us early on in this launch. Generally, things look stable. Congratulations all around. We're learning a lot, and there's definitely some things to work through. Anything to add to just that sequence of events or the discussion around them? Right. So honestly, I think there's probably a little bit more takeaways from the pre-launch. The post-launch, the technical issues are just quite frankly things that we need to work through, and we need to find stability in the next couple of weeks. I am considering between now and mainnet launch doing one or two production launch simulations, or full production launches, but on testnets that have a lower minimum ETH requirement and a stated end of life of approximately 3 days, so that we can give users a chance to have another dress rehearsal and have us work through any emergent issues in the Genesis process that might come up. I think doing at least one of these makes sense. Any comments or feedback on that?
Yeah, that sounds great to me. I mean, one minor pre-launch thing that I forgot to mention is like sometimes it feels like people are making the assumption that the minimum Genesis date or whatever this parameter date, as opposed to that being predicated on there being sufficient validators. So maybe there needs to be like a little bit more education on highlighting that possibility, I guess.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we're definitely, even internally, kind of planning on, okay, this is very likely the date. I think we all know that it isn't necessarily the date. But even giving a 4 to 7 day lead time also helps with the communication around that too.
Also, it would be good to have Trinity and Nevermind for the next launch, since they didn't participate in this one. So I suppose they also want to try their hand at being an early validator.
I can't speak for those teams. I know that they're both in a yes, but certainly welcome to join if and when they're ready. Joseph Chow, I believe that it is that the deposit contract does match the formally verified bytecode, but I can double check that after the call. We made sure to use the same compiler and flags. Okay. Does anyone have anything to add, just in general, about Medasha testnets? Cool.
I mean, one thing that we also, I guess, was that Prism is like dominating the network, it seems, at least maybe according to the ethernodes.org, like significantly over 50%. And I guess, maybe worth putting more effort to try and reduce this dominance just for the health of the network.
Yeah, agreed. As I think a lot of people are trying to communicate on Twitter, get the word out about different clients, and as some of the other clients stabilize in the next couple of weeks, I will do the same.
I mean, the other thing that I kind of is a question for people is, do you feel when there were issues during launch that you had the sufficient debugging tools to investigate them and understand where they came from sufficiently fast? or do we still have significant work to do there as well?
Like, could you clarify what you mean by debugging? Is it like finding the bug easily, or
Just
what?
insight into the network and the clients, right? The tools that we use, API endpoints, peer store dumps, metrics, anything that we use. And this is kind of, from my understanding, it's definitely ever growing. And as we have issues, these tools are kind of expanding. But does anybody have insight on that?
We're planning to develop a similar tool internally for quite some time. And I think there's a lot of, it's true that the clients have specific data structures which are internal, but they also have some common structures. Like it would be valuable to visualize in real time how the vaults are building up from attestations and blocks. And if there's a common tool, something like a web page, a dashboard that is using the RPC interface and displays this information in real time, it could be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. It seems, from my understanding, that the most opacity we have is on the gossip, and probably specifically on once my node says I've sent an attestation, what is actually happening? Because frequently, I think once basic stabilities happen, there's then the question of, okay, why is my client not performing optimally? We really don't have much. I don't think we have a good way of viewing that right now.
A tool that has been really helpful from the Block Explorer is that you map your validator ID to your ETH1 address, which also maps to your username, which I am not advocating this for mainnet, of course, because of validator privacy, but that has been helpful just to finding out which validators are offline and then who to talk to and stuff.
Yep. And being able to trace back faucets to users has been very, very useful in the past 4 days. Okay. Ready to move on? Great. Testing release updates. I don't think we have a lot here. There was a V0.12.2 release maybe right after the last call. I think most of you are very aware of that. There are a number of gossip sub v11 params that are related primarily to peer scoring that have defaults, I think, generally built into the protocol, but we're investigating these parameters. So if there are any changes, then a v0.12.3 would be in order in the next week or so. So keep your eye on that. Okay. Client updates. Let's start with Lodestar.
Hey, so we're basically working through some of the issues we saw on Madasha launch, namely gossip. I think that actually the issue was gossip validation and peering. So we're kind of seeing some issues where we don't get very many peers, and maybe some of that may be because we're not starting gossip immediately, and peers are kicking us because we're not supporting that protocol, but at least out of the gate. But we're basically working through these issues, some stability issues with sync, and we're thinking we'll be back at the testnet in a few weeks when we nail everything down.
Cool. Thanks. So you're seeing high load maybe from attestation gossip sub verifications. So like those conditions that you decide before you forward things.
No, I think it's actually just bugs in our block verification that were like silent. Things were silently failing, so it seemed like we weren't getting blocks. Maybe when we were, and then also that we didn't have very many peers, so we weren't getting very much gossip in the first place. So it's kind of the opposite of being choked. It was being like, we're thirsty for gossip.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Thank you, Canon. Nimbus.
Hi. So we've been working on Medaya. We identified 4 issues. There might be more. We fixed 2. So the first one is that the increased number of attestations revealed limits in the glue code between lip2p and OBCode node. In particular, in the period of non-finality, we're doing the same work multiple times when we received the same attestations or the same blocks multiple times. So we fixed this. This was a source of high slowness. Another one is an attestation processing bug. We wanted to optimize database loading by delaying the deserialization of public keys and signatures. And we explored 2 approaches. And unfortunately, the first one that we merged had a significant impact on sync. It was reverted, and we are now using the second approach, which gives the expected benefits, but has no impact on the rest of the stack. So this is fixed too. The 2 other bugs are still being investigated. So number 1 is Medaya blocks are often filled to the maximum of 128 attestations, and we are reaching the limits of Milagros. So we will switch to BLST next week. Otherwise, we also have a race condition on incoming and outgoing requests from the same peer, which led to issues, for example, with Lighthouse. And also, we have multiple reports of low peer counts, but we expect it is due to the long time spent on processing all those attestations. And this makes the node less responsive to network. And then we get kicked by peers. So this is for Medaya. And otherwise, on the audit side, the auditors finished the first phase of our audit, which was focused on networking. We are currently also fixing the issues raised during the audit, and the second phase, which will be on the beacon node, will start in 10 days.
Great. Thank you. Teku.
Okay, that is me. So we finished integrating the Blast BLS library and merged it in. It's showing some very useful speed up over our old Milagro JVM version, which was particularly slow. So we're getting about a 7 times speed up. We're going to keep the JVM version around just in case we come across architectures that the Blast library doesn't support, but one day we might deprecate it. Basic slashing protection is done now at the individual validator level. Internally, we're working on splitting out the validator process from the beacon node process, so that work continues well. And as we go on with that, we're implementing the new API endpoints as they become relevant. We've been migrating a lot of our storage APIs from synchronous to asynchronous, and improving the robustness of the networking in the face of the Johnny attack. That is handling denial of service attempts more gracefully, and just dealing with a whole bunch of bugs, usability bumps, general overall improvements everywhere. And finally, we're just closing out our security assessment RFP. we got a good range of responses, and we're interviewing vendors this week with a view to appointing somebody beginning of next week. That's all from Teku.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Prism.
Hey guys, it's me, Terrence. So over the last 2 weeks, before Genesis, we shipped Accounts Management V2, which contains implementation of direct, derived, and remote key managers. We also integrated that with the Launchpad steps and make sure this is documented and well tested. And after Genesis, we have mostly just been fixing bugs and UX issues that came from that. We've also had a few Beacon node related bug fixes since Genesis as well. We found a few the efficiency around that part. After Genesis, we have seen a surge of users joining our Discord and asking questions. And most of their questions regarding what to do when you run validators and how can you tell if the validator is running successfully. And so therefore, we have updated our Darts portals on that as well to document all the steps on like what to check for when things are running correctly. And yeah, that's all from me.
Great. Thanks, Terrence. Trinity.
Hey everyone. The main thing for us has been looking at sync performance for our beacon node. We were working with Altona and of course Namadasha. We sped up things by like, I don't know, a couple orders of magnitude, mainly with updates to the state transition, which was really nice. Bottleneck now is BLS performance. So we're looking at integrating BLST, and then otherwise just a bunch of miscellaneous networking things and pilot P2P we've seen while working to sync these different test nets.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. Lighthouse.
Hello. So like, I think a lot of people were just working on fixing the things that we found during Medalla, some stability issues that we're working on. I'm going to cut a new release soon that should increase attestation inclusion, at least remove an edge case where it might not be included. We've got a slasher functioning in isolation, looking at turning that on real networks soon, hopefully in the coming weeks. We've been working with the BLST people to ensure that BLST matches consensus, and also that if we can try and make it a bit more portable so it can run on, like we can build it for Docker and it can run on many machines. So we're still in talks about that, but we're running BLST on Medalla, and it's doing pretty well. We're starting on testing and working for weak subjectivity starts. We have someone on that full time now. We're progressing with our validator user interface. We have a basic visual identity down for Lighthouse. Hopefully we can go public with some of that soon. I think that's it from me.
Thanks, Walt. Another mind. Okay, I think that was everyone. Moving on, any research updates?
I mean, no research updates per se, but stuff that I've been doing for phase 0 is just, pushing forward the BLAST library, trying to resolve the edge cases that have been found, and also pushing for more optimizations, and the formal verification is also in the works. Very pleased with all the results so far. The other thing that I'm working on right now is trying to build a security team for Eth2. I mean, to start with, basically finding bugs in the Eth2 client implementations. So the idea here is that Eth2 security is a public good, and it kind of makes sense for the EF to provide resources there for all the clients. I've had about 40 applications so far, and we're going to be doing interviews in the coming days and weeks. If you have folks you think we should consider, please send an email to eth2security@ethereum.org.
Thanks, Justin. Any others?
Is there,
Yeah.
Justin, is there a call for the security team? Because I expect our own security team at Status will be eager to participate or even help you screen some of the applicants. Other teams would be interested as well to collaborate and scope up the role of this and how it interacts with all clients.
Yeah. So, more than happy to get people involved. I mean, at this stage, it's very early days, and it was, the message that was sent out was very broad, and we're looking for all sorts of different types of people. So, I guess we'll do a first round of filtering internally, and then when it comes to final hiring decisions, we'll be interfacing with the existing security team at Ethereum Foundation that's currently focusing on ETH1, and yeah, it also makes sense to focus with the security folks at the ETH2 teams. I've also been chatting with just security researchers in the broader Ethereum ecosystem. For example, people that have been doing DApp audits and things like that. So yeah, there's definitely lots of people to get feedback from, and different folks have different opinions. But yeah, the plan is definitely to provide more transparency as the funnel kind of becomes more refined. But yeah, feel free to shoot me a message on Telegram to chat more about that.
Other research updates?
Oh, I didn't know if that was mentioned last time, but there's basically been a pretty significant breakthrough for the secret single leader election. So basically, the most promising approach, which was the approach by Dan Bonnet, which is very elegant, very simple, and quite effective. Basically had two ways to be instantiated. It could either be instantiated with zero knowledge proofs or with fraud proofs. The cleaner way forward is with the zero knowledge proofs, but zero knowledge proof infrastructure is still somewhat nascent, and then there's questions about trusted setups and things like that. It turns out that we believe that there's basically a tailored zero knowledge proof for the very specific statement. So we don't need general purpose zero knowledge technology, and the specific proof is built using like the discrete log assumptions. So there's no trusted setup as with pairing groups. So this is an effort, I guess, mostly from Mary at Ethereum Foundation, and it's making secret single leader election really promising, potentially even for inclusion in phase 1 if things go well.
Thank you. Okay.
maybe on secret shared validators. So we had an introductory call a couple of weeks ago, and we're currently thinking about how to implement this. I think like one of the questions I have is which of the clients' teams might be interested in pushing ahead and implementing the API, which hasn't been specified yet, but I think like we'll try that in the next couple of weeks. It should be only like some small changes to the validator API. But it would be nice to have one client that actually implements it so that we can get a prototype out there. So yeah, if you're interested, then please contact me. I think it shouldn't be too much effort. I expect it to be like a couple of days. If you have that sort of capacity, I think it would be like really great if someone could do that.
Yeah, cool. Keep your eye on the secret shared validator channel on Discord for updates. Okay, networking. Anything to discuss in the P2P spec, or any issues we've run into on testnets that we want to discuss, Johnny?
Yeah, I had a comment / question. So there's been some discussion around like client distribution, and I think in general people are curious what clients are being run, what version of the software is being run. I know you opened an issue about potentially disabling the identified protocol, and so I'm curious what the motivation for that is. Is it we concerned about actually leaking what version of the client and what type of client is actually being run? If not, is it?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I threw that up there is that it's just an explicit leak of information that does not immediately provide a lot of utility to the network. It obviously provides a lot of utility to us in debugging.
Which is utility, right?
Right.
Yeah. I wonder if it actually, like, I mean, in practice, I would assume that building a scanner that can identify which client is running is not that hard, right? You find some characteristic of each client and you do it. So I mean, like are we actually really gaining anything by not providing that information?
Right. Like you can look at default ports, like Johnny said. You can look at how they, the particulars of sync. Like you can, I agree, you can figure it out.
So maybe we just leave it out there because it feels like this is security by obscurity, and we're just removing one nice channel that we have to like understand a bit more about the network and, for example, do things like correct for client imbalances and things like that.
Johnny, you've discussed that you think the identify protocol is a DOS vector. Do you want to talk about that?
It's just sort of speculation. It's not, and I think when we were talking, you made a good point. Like, it's not necessarily any more of a DOS vector than, than maybe other requests. But yeah, like I can repeatedly like, I can use like Rumor, for example, to like generate a peer ID, connect, hit you with an identify request, disconnect, regen another peer ID. And it's possible I don't even need to continuously generate peer IDs. So the question is, one, like, do we want to disable it for that reason? If that's the case, should we throw it? And if that information on the agent string is useful, should we put it in the ENR? If not, like I'd say in general, maybe how far do we want to go with DOS protection in clients? With these repeated requests, do we want to do some sort of like, do we want to recommend some sort of rate limiting by IP? Is that out of scope for clients? Like, how far do we want to
Does the identify protocol, does it serve to be any more of a DOS vector than a metadata request or a status request?
Well, I guess, I mean, it seems like it's implemented like in libp2p, right? So at least with metadata and status, can't our clients could like specifically like catch it, right, and apply some sort of rate limiting, in the client logic.
Okay, so the
My
identify
question is-
protocol doesn't actually make any sort of like callback into the application software, so we don't have much visibility there. Is that the main thing?
I mean, I'm not an expert. That's
Yeah.
just sort of my assumption. Maybe someone else can speak to that.
So if I want to use the identify for a particular version.
Yasik, your mic is unintelligible. Sorry. Do you have a alternate setup? Or are you going through your computer instead of your headphones or anything like that? I'll give you a minute.
While he's getting set up, I wanted to say that the one interesting thing that Identify gives is the signed peer records. And I don't know if anyone's using this, but Gossip Sub 1.1 has this like alternate discovery mechanism where if you prune a peer, you can send all of the signed peer records from other peers that you've collected. And so the pruned peer will have an opportunity to connect to other peers that they may not know about. And those signed records are sent in this identity protocol.
I see. Does the Gossip v11 use that by default, or is that a configuration flag?
I think it's it's configurable to be on or off. So I don't know if it's actually being used.
Okay. Well, we should consider making a recommendation on that being on or off, and that can be part of the decision on the identify protocol. It's part. So that information is given in the identify protocol.
Yeah. I mean, optionally. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. I mean, I'm relatively convinced that it's like not really buying us much by turning it off. I think we could put it as a may in the spec, but I think looking into how it's used in Gossip Sub and identifying if some of these protocols are, like Yasik said. So one way I'd use identify to faulty versions is to find faulty versions of clients and DOS them specifically. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the concern there, is if it makes it any significantly easier to identify clients. I suppose the identify protocol could be overridden to provide less specific information about version.
Yeah, we could just change the agent string, and just say like Prism, Lighthouse, Teku, Lodestar, whatever, Nimbus.
Yeah.
I mean, then you know the version. So that in particular would be fairly easy to fix, but we're concerned about knowing what the actual client is.
Right. And knowing the version is kind of nice, but as Yasik says, it does provide more explicit information. Like if I haven't upgraded my node in 5 months and there's a known issue, then somebody can go and find me and correct my known issue. Likely, I could potentially find that through some other type of information leak, but maybe not. Maybe not as a.
But like, is this really an issue with ETH1? Because even versions are pegged to different clients. Doesn't seem like a big issue for them.
What was that, Nishant? Where is the information? Is there a specific
No,
protocol?
like currently in ETH1, you can identify peers by their relative versions, right? So it doesn't seem like a big issue, like currently in ETH1.
Right.
Well, nonetheless, like I think that maybe we're asking the question the wrong way. Should we have a bar where we say that anything goes except the things that we haven't identified a way to break? Or is it rather that our bar should be that this has this particular use which motivates adding it? And if we look at it that way, well, providing a graph on the web page with client stats, I don't know if that's really a strong enough motivation to add something which makes it cheaper, at least, to attack the network.
Well, I mean, I think I disagree. I think this has much bigger benefits in terms of knowing what the distribution of clients on the network is for security reasons. So I think we gain more than an attacker from it, because an attacker can always make the investment if they're willing to break a client. They can invest enough to identify clients as well. I just don't think it's difficult. I think like anyone could build something like that in a few days.
Something to note is, like, and Johnny brought this up, default ports just totally leak the information at this point because the default ports are different. So we kind of already have that information there.
The other thing is Jacek, you make a good point about the the version information, and being able to identify like what clients are running old versions and then being able to attack them. But I would also argue that us having that information basically allows us to raise awareness. So like we see that like a lot of people are still running an old version of the client, then we need to get the word out like, hey, this needs to be updated. So in some ways it kind of balances it out.
Yeah, I think the asymmetry is in our favor if we have that information.
I mean, there are some arguments to removing it in the sense that it gives more power to an attacker, right? Because it's trivial to forge these things, and so an attacker could potentially forge them, and kind of the network would have a false sense of transparency, and maybe people might become complacent and not develop the scanning tools that Dankart were mentioning because they rely on this information, which could trivially be forged.
I would also say that like we should be making the assumptions that our users are competent and invested in their nodes, and that includes like keeping yourself up to date and having a healthy network setup.
Right, but one of the things we want is have a diversity of clients. How do our users know that they are not running the same client as everyone else if we remove that information?
Right, but at the same time, we can, if it's trivial for an attacker to figure this information out, we can probably figure it out too. For example, default port scans on discovery crawl.
And the second thing is that like even philosophically, like if we're entrusting our clients to validate, we should also be entrusting them to make this decision whether they believe that the multi-client setup is reasonable, right? I mean, it's still a choice that they make, and we give them this power to make a choice whether they run client A, B, C, or D, and the distribution that falls out of that, we kind of believe that is a good distribution by trusting them.
No, not if they're lacking the information.
Well, we give them the information that they should be diversifying their nodes, right?
And how can I do that if I don't know what the other clients are, what the other nodes are running?
Should we maybe move that to a specific call dedicated to privacy?
Yeah, I think we've made our points, and
Look,
time to step back and think about it.
Let's take a breath on this one. I do want to better understand how Gossip W1 is using Identify. It does feel strange that the Identify protocol is kind of overloaded in that sense. So I want to better understand that. I do think that we trivially link client information. So that should be under consideration both in the for and against Identify protocol usage. And I do hear you and agree, Jacek. Just because it was default there doesn't mean we should be considering turning off. We should be considering like, do we want this at all? I need to think about this one. I think everyone, let's take a breath and think about it. It's not critical that we decide today. And the conversation can continue on that issue. Any last words? Okay. Other networking items?
Yes. So aside from Medusha, there are new networks as well. AttackNet, we can talk about later in the call, and a new DevNet called Fatafa after the song by Datarock. It's just a fun, smarter testnet used to debug the P2P communication between Nimbus and Lighthouse. It's already live. The devs are already looped in. If anyone is interested in helping out debugging P2P problems or wants to join the network, they can ping us.
Thanks, brother. Other networking items? Okay. Preston brought up concerns around EIP 2334. I believe in this EIP, the same seed, the same mnemonic is used to derive using an HT wallet, both withdrawal credentials and active signing keys. This is certainly a convenience, but depending on how you choose to recover your withdrawal credentials, if you're not doing that on an air-gapped machine and then transferring key stores out of it, then you are exposing secrets, your withdrawal credential secrets on a hot machine. And I certainly see the debate here and see kind of the niceness of going each path. Carl, you wrote the EIP. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, largely in favor of as it stands now from a simplicity standpoint, but I do appreciate that having separate mnemonics does present other safety things. I think there's a strong argument to be made for not rederiving keys on a hot system. If you are going to be, if you are going to be doing that, I really think you should try and avoid that. But I'm curious to hear the counter arguments.
So, I think there is demand for having an alternative where your withdrawal credentials are fully isolated from your active signing keys. For example, I believe even just using hardware wallets in this type of setup is going to require these two things being decoupled. My understanding is that there is no way to export private keys from a hardware wallet, nor will that. I don't even think that can be programmed into hardware wallets if the hardware wallets are actually secure. Well, I suppose you're using the same mnemonic, but at that point, if you use your mnemonic outside of the hardware wallet, you're not even.
I mean, what you could theoretically do is ask hardware wallet providers to be able to export the validator keys. Yeah. But I'm not
can
sure
hardware wallets
right
even export private information?
No, they
if you
can't.
program them to, yes, for sure. I mean, like, this is all logic, right?
No, but the private information is on the secure enclave, which
They prevent you from accessing it at all.
Well, I mean, they can provide signatures, right? So there's some software that's running on there, and if it allows to export a certain derivative of the key, then. So I have no idea how they currently implement it, but I'm sure if they are already currently implementing new BLS software, then this is 100% possible as a functionality to implement it in there. If that should be done is another question.
So the hardware wallet, they give you the mnemonic to recover your key, but that's all. That's all.
Well, I'm simply saying there's a software running on the wallet that can create a BLS signature. If you modify that software so that it can also export a validator key, then that would work.
I'm not certain that is possible, actually. I don't know enough about secure enclaves to go more, to make a strong argument.
Well, I mean, my understanding is that the software for that is not yet finished. So it needs to be in that software that runs on a such secure enclave for sure. But if you put it in there, there's no reason why it couldn't do that. Of course, typically that's not what you want. Like typically all of them, the software right now is programmed in a way so that it would never export the private key or any private keys.
And my intuition on that would be that smells funny, and trying to convert hardware wallets to export private information is intuitively seems like the wrong path.
Another comment here is that hardware wallets, at least in their current instantiations, I'm 90% or 95% sure they're not powerful enough to implement the required password hardening as an script or PBKDF too. So they couldn't export the current key store formats.
Interesting.
Even if they wanted to.
I mean, I'm also unconvinced that it's the right way to do it. I think because, like, for example, another question is secret shared validators. You'd want to create those secret on the actual validator machines, like separately. You'd never want to create one single secret. So to me, it just feels like there should be a way to support two separate mnemonics and.
But on a secret shared scheme, you're not going to know what your keys are or where they exist in a tree anyway. Not relative to a mnemonic. I mean, your keys are entirely dependent on what other people choose as their keys, as in the other portions. So then talking about mnemonics doesn't really make sense in that context.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah.
So I think that we should do at least some thought and due diligence on how this EIP or another EIP might be modified to allow the optionality here. My understanding is that especially some of the more sophisticated users, maybe staking providers, are going to be having their cold storage keys decoupled from their hotkeys. And in that case, it's probably best to have a standard that can support that. I don't
Let me also say that I was actually very surprised when I did it through the Launchpad and the CLI that there was only one password and passphrase. I was like, wait, which one is it?
Right.
Yeah, but that's a semi-related or unrelated topic of the fact that we don't give withdrawal keys. So I did update the wording on the EIP to say that if you have a sufficiently good reason not to be following this exact process, you may, or if you can't use the keys at this location due to some other reason, then you may deviate from it. That you should try to stick to whatever is reasonable. So there's some scope for doing this kind of thing if you really would like to.
How does that manifest though? Does that make it easier? Like, does that allowance, but not a specific specification, does that lead to issues in actually developing software to do this particular use case?
Well, I think part of the argument would be that if you derive a specification specifically for having two mnemonics, then you're only solving one small problem, and that there's still more other different key usage scenarios that aren't envisioned, that aren't then afforded by whatever this new standard is.
Yeah, I suppose the reason for the standard is to capture enough of the use cases without overly complicating things.
Yeah. I'd also argue that by the time you start introducing two mnemonics, that's a lot of room for confusion. As in further confusion as to how the system works. I agree from a security standpoint, it's worthwhile, but I would definitely like for this not to be the standard flow.
Okay, I'm going to suggest we take this into the Discord. There is a key management, key standards channel. Does anybody have any further comment? I don't think we have a solution today, but I think that it does warrant further investigation. Cool. Spec discussion. Ongoing work on phase 1. Just fixed a bug yesterday and added some tests. Vitalik, you have some comments?
Yeah, well, I've been working on my own annotated spec for some time, and it's moved to the point where it's sitting in a repo now. So if people wants to look at that, I welcome feedback.
Cool.
Yeah. It's...
There's the link. Okay, other spec items? Great. During the madness of Madasha, Proto launched a new multi-client attack net that has Teku, Prism, and Lighthouse on it, 4,500 validators and 15 nodes with increased and some more interesting and targeted bounties. These single client attack nets still exist, and if you go and look at the rules, are to be used for particular types of bounties, very single client things. I don't think anything's fallen out of that yet, but people of the internet, go break them. Okay, anything else today? Open discussion, closing remarks. Great. Well, happy debugging. Congratulations on the Madasha launch, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks all. Bye.